The following program features the opinions of the host. Listeners are encouraged to seek their own understanding.
There are several important mountains in the area that we today call the Holy Land. Mount Hermon is one of these mountains and has been considered sacred for all of recorded history. This is where the fallen watchers made their descent, not only from the heavenly realm, but a descent into sin that would land them in chains in Tartarus. The River Jordan's headwaters launch from here. El lived here with his 70 sons, and the Grotto of Pan stands at its base. This mountain is not discussed in mainline churches, but it should be, because the ultimate battle started here. Welcome to the Ghost in You podcast, a podcast about the weird, the wonderful, and the terrifying in the Bible. I'm Diane Student, your guide and host on this strange journey through the Bible. Episode 8, Mount Hermon and the Watchers. Mount Shasta is a volcano that is the second highest peak at the southern end of the Cascade Range in California. On first glance, it's a beautiful, usually snow-capped mountain, but this is a mountain of legend, with Native Americans claiming that the spirit of the above world, Skell, came down onto the summit of Mount Shasta. There are some who claim that people from the lost continent of Lemuria sought refuge here and now live within the mountain. Some New Age believers think that Mount Shasta is a power center. This is a mountain of mystique, and it's interesting as a comparison to Mount Hermon. These peaks share many things in common. The first mention in the Bible of Mount Hermon comes when Israel is battling King Og of Bashan, whose kingdom included the mountain. And this was not surprising, considering that Og was the last of the Rephaim. He was a Nephilim. Deuteronomy 3, verses 8 to 10 reads, "So we took the land at that time out of the hand of the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians call Hermon Sirion, while the Amorites call it Senir. All the cities of the tableland, and all Gilead, and all Bashan, as far as Selica and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan." So Mount Hermon made up the northern boundary of the Amorite kingdom. The Amorites were a Nephilim clan, and they would be in this area because Enoch 6 tells us that it was this mountain where the Watchers came down. That passage reads, "And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Shemiazah, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then sware they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders: Shemiazah their leader, Erikiab, Ramiel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Danel, Ezekiel, Berechiel, Aziel, Amaros, Batarel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samspiel, Satarel, Turel, Jomjael, and Sariel. These are their chiefs of tens. One would think that this must be a very tall mountain to have been a place chosen by these fallen angels to gather and swear their oaths to each other. As someone who grew up in a state with 53 mountain peaks we call 14ers, because they stood over 14,000 feet, a mountain that rises to 9,232 feet seems a tad short. Clearly there's something else special about this mountain. The top is nearly snow-peaked year-round, and the runoff of this snow flows down through the rocks at the base of Mount Hermon, and at one time created the headwaters to the River Jordan. The river flows down into the Sea of Galilee and then on to the Dead Sea. The Jordan helped to keep things fertile that were near it, and while trees can be rare in Palestine, the Jordan Valley has many trees. This is an important river, as it has always been the main water source for Israel. It would later take on significance as this became the place where Jesus was baptized. Mount Hermon has 3 distinct summits. There's no vegetation above the snow line of Mount Hermon, and there's almost a complete absence of soil. Wolves, bears, and leopards live here, and that is reflected in Song of Solomon 4:8. Come with Libanus, my spouse. Come from Libanus, come. Thou shalt be crowned from the top of Amana, from the top of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of the lions, from the mountains of the leopards. Below the snow line is very fertile with pines, oaks, poplars, and vineyards. But again, nothing special. We have to assume that this mountain was considered sacred because it was chosen by the fallen, not vice versa. And I continue to wonder why. I have an old book titled The Bible is History, written by Werner Keller and published in 1956. This is a great book describing the archaeological discoveries of the time and how they affirm the biblical stories. I found this great passage about Mount Hermon on page 75. Some days later, W.F. Lynch stood on the slopes of snow-capped Hermon. Among remains of broken columns and gateways lies the little village of Bania. Local Arabs led him through a thick clump of oleanders to a cave half choked with rubble on the steep limestone flank of Hermon. Out of its darkness gushed a stream of pure water. This is one of the sources of the Jordan. The Arabs call the Jordan Shari at el Kabir, the Great River. This was the site of Paneum, where Herod built a temple of Pan in honor of Augustus. Shell-shaped niches are hewn out of the rock beside the Jordan cave. Priest of Pan is still clearly legible in Greek characters. In the time of Jesus, the Greek pastoral god was worshipped at the source of the Jordan. There the goat-footed Pan raised his flute to his tune. After reading this passage as a paranormal investigator, I immediately perk up when I hear terms like ridge of limestone, limestone cave, and, in this passage, steep limestone flank. I tried to find the geology of the other mountain peaks in the area, like Mount Sinai and Mount Nebo, and Hermon seems to be the only one full of limestone. And perhaps that is what made it special to the fallen ones, because it had a supernatural power supply within it. I've spent some time researching limestone and its paranormal properties. There are a couple of reasons why limestone seems to generate paranormal activity. First, one of the main components of limestone is quartz. Quartz is a crystal that is understood to absorb, store, and release energy. The other reason is magnetotactic bacteria. Magnetosomes are submicron crystals of magnetite that form chains intercellularly within magnetotactic bacteria. The bacteria uses iron in their bodies to travel through water using electromagnetic fields as guides. This kind of bacteria is found in limestone and is thought to be why limestone can record electromagnetic fields. Limestone has an interesting history with the Bible. There is a rock that is known as the foundation stone. Geologically, this is karsted limestone, and according to scientism and legend, it's said to be millions of years old. This rock is where Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac. This was also the threshing floor that King David bought, and he built an altar around the foundation stone. Solomon built the first temple on this stone. The second temple was built here as well, and now the Dome of the Rock is built on the foundation stone. Interestingly, the Islamic faith believes that angels visited the foundation stone 2,000 years before Adam was created. Muhammad is said to have ascended from heaven from this spot, and the area below the rock is believed to have a cavern known as the Well of Souls, and this is supposedly where the Ark of the Covenant is now stored. So things just got interesting here. What if Muslims are right and angels came down onto this foundation stone, which was made out of limestone? I don't know what they did after coming down. And on Mount Hermon, that is full of limestone, we have angels coming down on its summit. Are the angels coming down on these important sources of limestone because of the energy they emulate? The Canaanite god El was believed to have set his temple up on Mount Hermon, and he lived there with his 70 sons. El is also the god Kronos, who was the leader of the Titans that would later be overthrown by the Olympians. El is also Anu, the ancestor of the Anunnaki, whom the TV show Ancient Aliens loves to talk about, and also Enlil of the Mesopotamians, and Kumarbi of the Hittites and Hurrians. If you're having trouble keeping all these gods straight, don't worry, you aren't alone. My brain was fried by all of this. The key to keep in mind is that we are talking about many different cultures, but the same God, and how he or she was interpreted by a given culture. For me, this again solidifies my belief that these gods were real and that all these different cultures experienced the exact same rebellious angels masquerading as gods. They just had different names for the same god. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors. When these legends and stories refer to a god being the father of the gods, and in turn, these other gods being sons of a god, this is more than likely not talking about biological fathering, particularly for our purposes here, since we believe them to be angels. Angels clearly can impregnate humans, but not each other. So is it possible that Shemihaza, who was the ringleader of the Watchers, was the father of the gods of these cultures? And so perhaps the legend of El, having his temple on Mount Hermon with his 70 sons, is speaking of the Watchers, and then they were placed over the nations by God. We find this in Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Alfonso Archie writes in his article, Translation of Gods, Kumarpi, Enlil, Dagon, Nisaba, Halki. The Ebla archives show how originally some of the principal gods exercised control each over a particular region. These legends that permeate all the cultures of the region clearly back up the story of gods being placed over the cities, and these were places all around Mount Hermon, giving it a significant place in these stories. Also in Alfonso Archie's work, he connects Dagon with El, who was not only a fish-like god, but referred to as the Lord of the Dead. This is interesting because Mount Hermon, which towers over Bashan, is said to be the entrance to the Canaanite underworld. Literally speaking, Mount Hermon is believed to be the entrance to hell. The punishment for the Watchers was to be thrown into Tartarus, which was below Hades and hell, so this wouldn't have been a long trip for them. The only temples that still stand on Mount Hermon are of Roman design. There are around 30 of them. George F. Taylor provided a pictorial guide to the temples in the 1960s, and he maintained that they were built by the hand of a single master builder. An interesting concept. Of most interest to me, though, is why these shrines would have been built up on a mountain that spends much of its time covered in snow. They were worshiping something here. Khazar-Antar was said to have been the highest temple of the ancient world, and it sits near the summit of Mount Hermon. Sir Charles Warren visited it in 1869 and took a limestone slab from the site that reads, "According to the command of the greatest and holy God, those who take an oath proceed from here." The man who translated this, George Knucklesburg, connected this inscription with the oath taken by the Watchers that bound them together in their rebellion. So the god referred to here is thought to be Baal. Clearly, many gods were worshipped here on Mount Hermon. The god Pan is connected with the headwaters of the Jordan River and the area at the base of Mount Hermon from where the headwaters used to run until geology caused them to move, and it's known as the Grotto of Pan. Pan is a very interesting god. He at first seems to be some kind of weird wood nymph that is half man, half goat, that runs around playing a pan flute and just looking for a good time with a phallus that expresses that, interest. But he is far darker than that, and seems to be what satanic images have been modeled after. Satan is usually depicted as half man, half beast, with cloven hooves, a tail, and horns. Pretty much the image of Pan. In Greek mythology, Pan was either the offspring of Hermes and a wood nymph, or Apollo and Penelope. And there are also other stories like Penelope sleeping with 108 suitors when Odysseus was away and she gave birth to Pan. There's no clear genealogy. It is believed that he predated the Olympians. One of the myths told about him is how he came to play his pan flute. Pan desired a wood nymph named Syrinx, who was the daughter of Ladon, the river god. She wanted nothing to do with Pan, so she ran away from him. He pursued her and was gaining when she came upon her sisters and begged them to hide her. They changed her into a reed that was among many reeds. Pan eventually got to where the reeds were located, but he couldn't tell which one was Syrinx. He took some of the reeds and cut them down and placed them together to form a pan flute. He was never without it after that, and felt that his beloved Syrinx was with him. The word panic comes from Pan, as does pandemic, and Peter Pan's name is a tip to him. Pan is the only god that has reputedly died As reflected in the declaration, Great Pan is dead. Banias is the Arabic pronunciation of the pagan cult city known as Panias, as named for Pan. The Romans called this Caesarea Philippi. The limestone cave here was considered a gate to the underworld. Fertility gods were said to spend the winter inside the cave. Orgies were held at the cave to entice Pan to return, particularly in the spring. But despite all this, the location is very special for Christians and reveals the power of God. Here is Matthew 16, verses 13 to 20. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Jesus stood in front of this place the people at the time believed was the gate of hell, and he proclaimed that the gates of hell shall not prevail. Pretty amazing. On the heavenly side of things, Mount Hermon was an important place for Yahweh too. Some scholars believe that this was where Eden was located, and some scholars believe that this was the Mount of Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is described in Matthew 17, verses 1 through 8. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and have no fear." And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. The reason why I lean to this being the right location for the Transfiguration is that Jesus and the disciples were just at Caesarea Philippi right there in chapter 16. These two stories happen right next to each other. The mountain is also described as a high mountain, which was mentioned for a reason, I'm sure. And how fitting to take the mountain of the false gods and have Moses and Elijah come down and hang out for a while. Mount Hermon is an amazingly mystical place that not only was important for pagans, it was important to God. Does this mountain hold powerful energy? Is this the entrance to the underworld and hell? Are the watchers below this mountain locked up in chains at Tartarus? The ghost in you knows. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. May God bless you and keep you. This has been a production of History Goes Bump.